On this Sunday night, Pope Francis arrives in Canada.
I asked the Pope to walk with us in this new journey.
The prayers for reconciliation as the penitential pilgrimage begins. How residential school survivors are fighting through trauma on this historic visit. A Canadian dead in the Donbass. Ukraine's eastern conflict zone remains under Russia's relentless attacks. Searing heat smothering the U.S.
Sheriffs came up, they go, "You got to go now." It's just like a hurricane.
Soaring temperatures and bone-dry conditions fueling wildfires and flash droughts. Plus, Canada's Golden Boys.
It's a great feeling, after having the season I've been having.
Andre DeGrasse's race to beat COVID and take a top prize at the World Championships.
Global National with Bara Nasser. Reporting tonight, Tracy Tong.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. After months of planning and preparation, Pope Francis has officially landed on Canadian soil. He touched down in Edmonton to begin a journey of reconciliation. After years of pleas for the pontiff to come to Canada, to personally acknowledge the devastating toll of church-run residential schools on Indigenous lives, today Pope Francis was greeted on arrival by the people and culture those institutions once sought to erase. Compelling scenes that will no doubt also shape his trips to Quebec City and Iqaluit over the next 6 days. The visit is already evoking a spectrum of emotions from Canadians. As Sarah Ryan reports in our top story, everyone is watching and waiting to hear what the Pope has to say on the Catholic Church's role and responsibility in generations of anguish.
After a lengthy 10.5-hour flight from Rome, the leader of the Catholic Church, Pope Francis, has arrived. Using the support of a wheelchair to relieve a strain on his ailing knee, the same one that's limited his mobility recently and led to the recent cancellation of a trip to Africa, Francis otherwise appeared well, smiling at those who came to greet him. Fittingly, the first to welcome the Pope to Edmonton was Canada's first Indigenous Governor-General, Mary Simon, followed by the Grand Chief of Alberta's Treaty 6 First Nations, George Arcand Jr., and then the Prime Minister. The latest step on the path to reconciliation, the reason for the Pope's visit, front and center. Grand Chief Arcand called the meeting humbling, adding he asked Pope Francis directly to walk with Indigenous Canadians on a new journey.
Come and talk and apologize to our survivors so that we could begin our journey of healing and that we can begin the opportunity to change the way things have been for our people for many, many years.
Around 25 dignitaries were introduced to the Pope Sunday, including elders and residential school survivors. All are keenly aware of the Church's role in the residential school system, all awaiting an apology on Canadian soil.
It's a long time coming for the people that suffered in the schools, but I'm glad to live that day that I seen it.
Edmonton's mayor called the Pope's arrival a chance for the start of a new chapter.
We should never be afraid to talk about what went wrong, but with the view that we need to move forward together to build a better future for all of us.
Pope Francis, now 85 years old, was escorted through the hangar, surrounded by security, and into a small waiting Fiat to be escorted into Edmonton, the first stop on his 3-city papal visit. Although it is Sunday, the Pope will not be celebrating Mass. Instead, he will be resting here at St. Joseph's Seminary in central Edmonton. Catholics we spoke to outside the Basilica are also eager to hear from him.
I think all Catholics are really excited for him to be here, but at the same time we recognize it's a somber occasion.
We have been praying for weeks now that it's going to be a really good visit for the Pope, that he'll be welcomed, and that there will be a spirit of reconciliation like we haven't seen before.
Some were able to snag tickets for the Pope's open-air Mass this week. Some 60,000 people are expected at Commonwealth Stadium on Tuesday.
It will be a dream come true.
But on his first day in Canada, the Pope chose not to speak publicly, reserving his opening statement for Monday in Musqueam, where he'll apologize for the Church's role in residential schools.
When you own up to a wrong, that's when reconciliation can start.
The Pope has arrived. Canadians across the country now wait to see if his presence here can help the healing begin. Sarah Ryan, Global News, Edmonton.
Well, for many Indigenous Canadians, the Pope's visit will be a source of healing. But not all residential school survivors feel this way. For those living with the trauma of a lost childhood, lost language and culture, the Pope and the Church bring up a lot of complicated feelings. This week will be a deeply triggering event. Heather Yourex-West has more.
To watch Perry Omiesu on camera and in the kitchen in one of his many YouTube cooking videos, you can't help but smile. He has a unique ability to spark joy in others, even as he carries a heavy sadness within.
To the day I die, that darkness is going to be in my heart, and it's never going to go away. It's never going to go away. And yeah, so it's been difficult.
More than 1,200 kilometers from his home in Squamish, BC, the source of that darkness is now marked with a memorial stone. It was here that the Ermineskin Residential School stood for more than 80 years. Omiesu was forced to attend when he was just 5 years old.
I had a good spiritual kind of upbringing, and then they took me away from that and put me into Indian residential school. And what a change, Heather, what a difficult and ugly change in my life. I didn't know how to speak any English till I got there. And my cousin said, don't get caught speaking Cree or you're going to get hit. For like a year, I hardly spoke to anybody. I felt so alone.
Omiesu is now a mental health counselor and a father to 3 adult sons. Healing, he says, is something he's had to work at every day.
It just kept getting triggered, and every time they'd go to a new residential school and found more bodies at these other residential schools, I would get triggered again.
But for him, the Pope's visit will have no part in that healing.
Like, that's not for me, if I can say that. It's like that whole thing is not for me.
Paving the road through Musqueam was prioritized in anticipation of the Pope's visit. Omiesu wonders why that wasn't done for the community before. He says a papal apology alone won't fix the inequities Indigenous people continue to face.
I hope the Pope can have a cup of tap water while he's there and drink that.
Still, the visit will put the truth of Canada's residential school system in an international spotlight, highlighting not only the pain of the past, but present-day injustices Indigenous people deal with daily within Canada's institutions, from healthcare and child welfare to justice and housing. Acknowledging and illuminating these issues is what gives Omiesu hope.
I think when my sons are older, when they're men and they have children, I think their sons are going to be just such in a better place. They'll be able to walk with their heads up and say, oh, they're Indigenous. I want the world to know that, that we want to get past this too.
But for Omiesu, true reconciliation is a work in progress that must continue long after the Holy Father returns home. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Musqueam, Alberta.
And a reminder that if you or someone you know is a residential school survivor and is looking for help, you can call the Residential School Survivors and Family Crisis Line. The number is 1-800-721-0066. And we will have full coverage of the Pope's 6-day visit to Canada right here on Global National, globalnews.ca, and our other online platforms. Global Affairs Canada confirmed today that a Canadian citizen died recently in Ukraine. In a statement, a Canadian Foreign Ministry spokesperson says Global Affairs Canada is aware of the death of a Canadian in Ukraine, and consular officials are in contact with the family and are providing consular assistance. No further details are being made public due to privacy considerations. Media reports suggest the Canadian was with 2 U.S. citizens who died in the Donbass region in Ukraine's eastern conflict zone. And staying in Ukraine, the country's forces seem set for a counteroffensive to take back more Russian-controlled territory.
До нашої перемоги вона буде. Передусім можна сказати зараз про Херсон.
In a Saturday address, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says troops are now moving step by step into the southern Kherson region, which fell to Russia with little resistance early in the war. Ukrainian artillery strikes have recently targeted and damaged key river crossings in the region. If destroyed, they could cut off crucial supply lines to Russian forces there. Earlier this month, Ukraine had urged area residents to flee to avoid getting trapped in a counterattack. And Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov began a tour of African nations to rally more allies over Moscow's conflict in Ukraine. In his first stop in Cairo, Lavrov reaffirmed Russia's grain export commitments to Egypt after the crisis disrupted supply shipments. A destructive wildfire in California is burning out of control, forcing nearly 3,000 people to evacuate. The Oak Fire, near Mid-Pines in Mariposa County, has grown to about 60 square kilometers. It has destroyed 10 buildings and cut power to more than 2,000 homes and businesses. Hot weather, steep terrain, and bone-dry conditions are fueling the flames. California's governor has declared a state of emergency near Yosemite National Park due to that raging wildfire. And a blistering heat wave baking much of the U.S. this weekend is expected to make the firefight much worse. Over 90 million Americans are under extreme heat warnings or advisories tonight. Jennifer Johnson reports.
Sweltering temperatures are burning up the northeast U.S. this weekend, with high humidity making it even more unbearable and dangerous.
It's too hot. It's too hot right now.
The heat is so oppressive, Boston's triathlon had to be postponed, and a similar event in New York was shortened, with participants told to take precautions.
Extra water, yeah, and we have medical staff on site just in case anything does happen. We've got trained professionals here.
But now there are grave concerns about tens of thousands of New Yorkers who can no longer apply for cooling assistance benefits used to pay increased utility bills or buy air conditioners because funds have run out.
There has been such a big demand for this program given the heat wave. The applications went up from about 10,000 to 30,000 that the state has had to freeze its program.
Senator Schumer is asking the Biden administration for additional money before more people die in this dangerous heat. Millions are flocking to community pools, but at least a fifth of them in Philadelphia are still closed due to a lifeguard shortage.
With the high temperatures come big crowds, and it becomes a lot of pressure on lifeguards sitting up there, especially in heat. It can be very dangerous.
Don't let dehydration ruin your vacation.
With deaths already being reported and dozens of hospitalizations for heat exhaustion and heat stroke, doctors are warning people to keep hydrating if you're outdoors. Symptoms can begin as quickly as 20 to 30 minutes.
It's about the amount of time that you're exposed to the heat and then also what you're doing while you're in that heat.
It is a sweltering hot day here in Boston today. Manager John Schneider's feeling it, 34 Celsius.
The show went on in Boston as the Red Sox took on the Blue Jays in the heat and high humidity. A hot day of play for the red-hot Blue Jays, as medics keep an eye out for fans braving the high temperatures to see the game. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Coming up, an accused killer's escape in BC and how he may have thrown police off his trail. We are tracking developments in British Columbia tonight after a man on trial for murder escaped from a Metro Vancouver correctional facility. Law enforcement agencies in Canada and around the world were alerted to the escape, and the RCMP released photos of two suspected accomplices. Now, it turns out the photos of the two men shared by police were stock photos, available for purchase to anyone on the internet. Catherine Urquhart reports.
At North Fraser Pretrial Center in Port Coquitlam, members of the RCMP investigate how an accused killer escaped. Rabbi Al-Khalil broke out of the maximum security facility Thursday night.
Al-Khalil's connections range from across Canada to the United States, Europe, and Asia. A Canada-wide arrest warrant and an Interpol red notice are being prepared.
Al-Khalil is charged with first-degree murder for the high-profile and very public 2012 shooting death of gangster Sandeep Door in the Sheraton Wall Center.
After the murder,
Robbie Al-Khalil fled the country when a number of search warrants were executed by the Vancouver Police Homicide Unit in Quebec. We believe he was working in concert with other suspects.
Investigators are not confirming how he managed to escape the facility, but there are reports a plasma cutting torch was used to cut a hole in the fence. He fled in this white Econoline van, which has since been found. North Fraser pretrial has had escapes before. In 2007, surveillance video showed 37-year-old Omid Tavili dressed as a janitor being escorted out by a guard who was promised $50,000 to aid in his escape. Tavili, an organized crime kingpin, has never been caught. The guard never received his money and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Now, the latest escape.
There will most definitely be a full-scale review and investigation into what happened and how it happened.
Catherine Urquhart, Global News, Vancouver.
Ahead, personal freedoms under attack in the land of the free. In the U.S., the reality of Roe versus Wade falling shocked a country that has grown accustomed to having rights over personal health decisions. Since then, the Democrats have been seeking to shore up support to protect Americans from having more rights taken away in the future by the conservative-leaning court. Reggie Cecchini reports.
Across the land of the free, personal freedoms have come under attack.
Our opponents are working to take women's rights away.
In June, the Supreme Court, for the first time in its history, rescinded legal rights by overturning Roe versus Wade. Justice Clarence Thomas writing in the landmark decision that other high court rulings could be next to fall.
When Justice Clarence Thomas and the other justices said, if it's not written in the Constitution that you don't have that right, that should send shivers down the spine of anyone, conservative as well as progressive.
House Democrats, frequently criticized for passive politics under the Biden administration, raced to put rights at risk up for a vote to codify into law, including abortion rights.
The bill is passed.
Same-sex marriage.
The bill is passed.
And this week,
the bill is passed.
Access to contraception.
I'm appalled that we have to vote on this damn bill at all.
The U.S. is now standing alongside Nicaragua, Honduras, Poland, other countries that have more autocratic regimes.
With Democrats' majority, passing these bills in the House was expected, but Republican support, even if small, wasn't. In fact, nearly a quarter of House Republicans supported reaffirming equal marriage rights. The deadlocked Senate, too, might get on side.
I want to bring this bill to the floor. The legislation is so important.
Polling shows the vast majority of Americans are supportive of these measures, but the High Court is now harder to predict.
The court has been captured by a very extreme right-wing majority, and it just invites attention to the legitimacy of the court.
Can the United States still be seen as a beacon of freedom, given the fact that it is now slowly starting to erode the rights of people?
The American people and those people who study the Constitution and legal history don't know what this conservative cohort is going to do next because they're not following a logical path.
And with little appetite at the White House for changing the composition of the court by adding more justices,
vote, 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 vote.
The people whose rights are at risk may hold ultimate political power in November's midterm elections. Reggie Cecchini, Global News, Washington.
And that is Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Tracy Tong. Tonight's Your Canada is the town of Strathmore, Alberta. Don't forget to send your photos in. Thanks for watching. Neetu Garsha will be broadcasting from Edmonton tomorrow for the Pope's visit. Hope you can join us then. Have a great night.